Hello and welcome to the channel. I am attira.kell and this is A Soldier's Opinion, a series where I apply my 18 years of experience within the military to Star Citizen. I try to address where we are today within the game and discuss where I think we should be headed to replicate an adequate level of realism within the game. And don't forget to like, to share, and subscribe if you like what you see, as it lets me know you want me to keep delving into how CIG can bring more realism to the military professions of Star Citizen. Today we are continuing our discussion of capital ships, specifically how we currently operate navies, fleets, and ships today. But first let me correct myself on 2 points from the first video on cap ships. In January 2016, the 10 for the Chairman episode 74, Chris Roberts stated that really big ships like the Javelin would be persistent on the server but would have a safe area where it could not be destroyed or stolen. He didn't seem 100% sure how they were going to address unsafe areas, though I'm sure that by now he has matured that thought a little bit further. So it seems that the Idris will indeed despawn when the right conditions are met. The second correction is with regard to crew size. I got a comment that said the crew values on the site are pre-growth values, and so the frigate crew sizes are closer to a minimum of 28 and a maximum of 81. Now I have looked around Spectrum and the RSI site, and I can't find anything that definitively says that. It may be in one of the many videos CIG has produced, which I really can't find immediately. Now, let's get back on track. For this video, more than the last even, I am certainly exceeding my ability to do some research. So to accomplish this task, I've called in some supporting gunfire again from that co-worker who in a recent past life was a surface warfare officer, or a SWO, in the US Navy. We are going to approach this subject from the perspective of a surface action group, though we in the game might call this a space or system action group. This is typically composed of multiple cruisers or destroyers or a mix of ships, and we will focus here primarily because the ships that make up surface action fleets are what we as players will immediately have available to us in-game at launch. So get some coffee and buckle up. We are now going to dive into naval doctrine, a dry topic to be sure, but one that is critical to understand if we plan on employing ships effectively. The US Navy breaks down their core strategy for fleet operations into 4 categories at present: dominant maneuver, precision engagement, full dimension protection, and focused logistics. Dominant maneuver is defined as the multi-dimensional application of information, engagement, and mobility capabilities to position and employ widely dispersed air, sea, land, and space forces to accomplish specific tasks. So in our terms, what should we expect to be able to do in Star Citizen with our capital ships? Well, the US Navy still uses specific formations when moving about the high seas. For a SAG, or Surface Action Group, they use a line formation when heading into uncertain conditions. In the Army, we would call this a column formation. The lead ship is usually several miles ahead of the rest of the group, kind of like a sacrificial lamb. If they are attacked as a single ship, it warns the rest of the group of the threat. The line also masks the radar signature of the group, hiding their numbers. Once combat is joined, the Navy typically tries to engage at around 200 miles out from the ship with their missile systems. They will typically attempt to overwhelm their target's ability to counter incoming missiles, ending the encounter quickly. If they know the specific ship type they are facing, they might know that it carries, say, 4 anti-missile defense turrets, so they will launch 10 to 15 surface-to-surface missiles to overwhelm the target and guarantee the kill. Within Star Citizen, this type of strike would be accomplished by torpedoes fired from any one of the cap ships we have discussed. I think we need to see a drastic increase in what ships of this size and capability can see with their sensors. We are 900 years in the future. That means that we should see drastic improvements in our tools of war. Now, I know that you might be thinking that this seems like a boring way to fight a space battle. But really, we are only talking about the opening shots. In our game, it is unlikely that you're going to get a clean kill unless the crew of that ship is very negligent. So even with an exceptionally placed torpedo strike from 200 to 300 kilometers away, we would still need to close the gap and finish off our opponents. But this does offer the well-prepared fleet employing proper reconnaissance an alpha strike option on a lone ship or pair of ships, which at some level should be possible. Jumping back to present day, the US Navy does still train for deck gun engagements. These engagements typically occur somewhere between 2 and 30 kilometers, and believe it or not, the tactics have not changed much from World War II. There are 2 core tactical principles that are followed: Based on intelligence of the opposing ship, the captain has to make a decision on which to pursue. First, if their direct fire weapons outrange the opposing ships, then you attempt to stay outside their range while engaging with your own weapons. The second is if their deck gun can outrange yours, then you must rapidly close the distance and get under their gun's minimum range. In Star Citizen, Principle 1 holds true. We should have enough variation in gun types eventually to allow us to exercise this principle. Ballistics might have a better range, but of course have limited ammunition, while energy weapons only require power, but might require you to get slightly closer to your opponent. Principle 2 gets a little dicey. We do know that some ships will have gaps of coverage in their fields of fire, so exploiting these will be key. But in most cases, at least one gun will be able to cover part of the ship's firing arc, so the key will be to minimize the number of opponent gun batteries that can target you at any one time, while keeping your own anti-ship batteries at an angle where they can engage the opponent's ships. Believe it or not, crossing the T is still considered a viable maneuver within naval combat today with regard to deck gun combat, as it limits the amount of weapons an opponent fleet can employ against you at any given time. Prime targets for gun battery engagements within modern navies is the bridge and the phase array radars, and so I think we should expect similar targets to produce similar results within Star Citizen. Destroy the radar, you limit the opponent's ship's overall combat effectiveness, meaning gun battery targeting solutions are significantly degraded. Remove its bridge and the ship is dead in space until the battle bridge is manned. What is absolutely 100% key here is that at no point would I expect to see capital ships in Star Citizen to behave the way they were flown at CitizenCon in 2017. Those Idrises were flown much like fighters, and jousting should never be a go-to tactic with regard to capital ships. And funny enough, this was recently discussed in the Idris and Multicrew Calling All Devs. Another key ability that exists today that we should absolutely see in Star Citizen is Cooperative Engagement Capability, or CEC. This is the practice of linking warships, allowing one warship to fire off another warship's targeting solution, even if they can't see the target or get their own firing solution. There are technical limitations to this in real life, and there should be in Star Citizen. But when those hurdles, mainly software and hardware, are overcome, it works very well and is a massive combat multiplier for a surface action group. I think we should also expand this capability to reconnaissance ships as well. If you have a recon ship a few hundred kilometers ahead of the fleet, you should be able to see what they see. And if your torpedoes can range the opponent, then you should be able to target and fire on the target based on that recon ship's targeting solution. This would make counter-reconnaissance a key mission for players with large fleets, especially if they are currently warring with another organization or a similar NPC power. Now, let's move on to precision engagement. This is defined as a system of systems that enables our forces to locate the objective or target, provide responsive command and control, generate the desired effect, assess our level of success, and retain the flexibility to re-engage with precision when required. To achieve this, the US Navy requires a few things. To target an opponent's ship, they need an effective radar capability that can identify and track an enemy ship and guide missiles to their intended target. For ground targets, they need an effective reconnaissance platform that finds the target they are looking for. Next, they need a solid set of coordinates they can use for GPS precision-guided munitions. For deck guns, it is much the same, relying on the radar systems to effectively target with precision, though the less capable mass-mounted radar systems can also serve to provide a targeting solution for the guns. And when all else fails, everything falls down to the gun captain. If he is good, then he can employ the deck gun effectively, maybe even using the auxiliary manual sight. If he's not good, well, the ship is out of luck. So what does that mean for Star Citizen? Well, our torpedoes are self-guided. We should be able to jam incoming torpedoes and missiles. But what about our ship-guided munitions? Maybe that is a more challenging job for an EW operator. We should have a choice in the type of torpedoes we equip on our ships, enabling us to use maybe a more vulnerable fire-and-forget torpedo, or instead opt for a ship-guided system that is linked to the ship in some way, making it harder to jam. I think we should also definitely be able to manually launch unguided torpedoes and missiles if required. If a ship is completely jammed out and their electronic defense crewmen can't clear the interference, a ship captain should be able to take a more aggressive stance, close the distance, and fire manually. The same applies, of course, for gun batteries. We are all used to lead pips that tell us mostly where to fire our weapons. If you're being jammed, how does the ship make those computations? The answer is it can't. So you need a crewman capable of cutting through the static and keeping the ship from operating in a degraded status and enable precision engagement. Now we will move on to full dimensional protection. This is defined as the multi-layered offensive and defensive capability to protect naval forces at all levels from adversary attacks while maintaining freedom of action during deployment, maneuver, and engagement. This goes hand in hand with precision engagement. There are many threats in today's world. For the naval vessel, they must defend their airspace, or in our case, space, their electromagnetic spectrum, cyberspace, and more. CIG has all three of these planned for Star Citizen, which means that we need to be able to both attack and defend against all three. As a quick side note, it was during this part of the discussion with my coworker that I told him that currently our radar is limited to about 10 kilometers, and his response was a chuckle in the comment, "Wow, that's worse than the 1930s." So I definitely think that we have some room to grow in that area. But what I'm getting at here is that if there is an attack capability, there must be a complementary defense capability. For capital ships, anything above a frigate should be able to conduct EW warfare. Equally, there should be a bank of consoles that allow crewmen to defend against such attacks. This is a matter of filtering out the interference so that the ship is fully operational. If a ship's crew cannot defend against an EW attack or a cyber attack successfully, then the ship should have backups that are less effective but still usable. This might mean that there is a degree of error in the gunner's lead pips, and missiles or torpedoes take much longer to lock on, or have to be manually targeted. Finally, in our discussion of doctrinal fleet operations, we have to talk about focused logistics. The U.S. Navy defines this as the fusion of information, logistics, and transportation technologies to provide rapid crisis response, to track and shift assets even while en route, and to deliver tailored logistical packages and sustainment directly at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels of operation. Well, we can expect the UEE to have something like that within their Navy, but how does it apply to us as players? There is a modern witticism that states amateurs talk about tactics, but professionals study logistics. And while this may only be a witty comment, there is some real and underlying truths that go along with it. For capital ships, we can break down logistics into four primary categories. Sundries, which are food and luxury items. Fuel, which would include all POL, which is petroleum, oil, and lubricant products that a large ship requires to maintain operations, and parts and ammunition. Within those core supply categories, I would expect capital ships to require resupply of those four on maybe a weekly basis in game time for the Idris and up. That doesn't mean they could not go longer, but in keeping with doctrine, when you resupply fuel, you might also resupply other classes of supply to ensure that if you do need to suddenly go on a long journey without resupply, you are prepared. Now, we have discussed that nuclear-powered ships, which in history began at the cruiser and submarine and run up to the carrier, require new reactor fuel only every 25 years or so. And I've already mentioned that this wouldn't be a nuclear reactor, but maybe some type of new system CIG makes up to generate propulsion in a completely fictitious way. I think that this could easily be extended to the Javelin, given that we are 900 years in the future, and maybe even to the Idris. I think this might provide an additional engineering mechanic requiring a different set of skills to run that engine type, while also removing some of the overhead from operating these ships. This would certainly deepen engineering gameplay. I would go even further to say that maybe this equipment is reputation based, and if you are a lawful character, you can purchase it from the UEE with a significant amount of reputation built up. And if you are a pirate, maybe you get a mission to steal one at a high enough reputation. To install such a system, maybe your ship has to be placed into dry dock for a month or two in real time, but the result is a drastically improved, never-ending fuel supply that represents a real end-game achievement. I will also say that in my opinion, a propulsion system that followed this rule set would only cover normal maneuver. I think the clear exception to this is quantum drives and the fuel, which I think should certainly be a limiting factor for these larger ships. But if we are going to have hydrogen fuel for our corvettes, frigates, and destroyers, there is a current model for that. Today, most navies in the world do not let their ships drop below 70% fuel capacity during normal operations. That generally means they can operate for about 5 to 6 days before needing to top up. However, these ships can typically operate for 3 to 4 weeks before they actually run dry of fuel. So to that end, I think that larger ships such as the Caterpillar and up should have a much longer range than perhaps we do now. This is more of a function of fuel efficiency 900 years from now than it is about large fuel tanks. And of course, this should be affected by the quality and type of a ship's power plant, but not to the extent that a major cargo ship like the Cat wouldn't be able to run for a few days without a refuel. Now, that brings us, of course, to logistical nodes. Where to place them? How much supply do they have to have on hand? Mobile versus stationary. All factors that must be planned. Now, CIG will place the largest and most effective logistical supply nodes for us in the form of large stations and planetary outposts. And we have those in game now. But when we transition to player-made logistical nodes, I think there is some good gameplay and planning to be had here. We do have the massive and excellent Pioneer. This is, at least initially, how we are going to establish ourselves on a planet for fixed-site basing and logistical operations. I do not doubt that CIG is planning a fuel structure for players that will serve as a container to refuel players' ships within sufficient range of the tanks. These will of course have to be maintained, filled, defended, as they will be high-value targets, or HVTs, for an opposing organization to strike. Disabling such a facility might significantly limit an opposing organization's reach within the system they have established themselves in. Next, we have mobile resupply ships. The first in this lineup is the Vulcan, which is an all-in-one medium repair and refuel capability, followed by the Starfarer, which has a military and civilian variant. For medical, there is the Cutlass Red, the Apollo, and the Endeavor, which can be outfitted as a mobile hospital. We also have the Crucible, which is a more of an end-game level ship for heavy repair. But in all honesty, we are lacking a concept for what is needed for capital ships. Believe it or not, today's resupply ships can be up to 600 feet long, while the average destroyer is only around 520 feet. These ships typically stay at sea for over a month, resupplying multiple warships. These massive oilers, as they are called, have ratings that determine what they are allowed to carry on board. My coworker has experienced 4 separate types of resupply ships. Some that only carry fuel, while some carry both sundries and fuel, while some only sundries and ammunition, while still others carry all 3. And then you can also lump into that most of these ships will also carry parts. So what I am saying is that we are missing a planned mechanic for this function, though I think we have a series of ships primed to serve in this role. The whole series of ships clearly has the capability and modularity to serve as a UEE oiler equivalent for our purposes, but to achieve this we would need some additional modules to help us make that a reality. Instead of 40-foot containers, the ship would instead mount hydrogen fuel tanks. To transfer the fuel exactly as we do today, at least one of those containers would need to carry a refueling boom mechanism that we could reach out with and connect with a Polaris, Idris, or Javelin. From there, fuel transfer begins, taking maybe 20 minutes or so of real gameplay. The mechanics of connecting all of the fuel tanks with the pumping mechanisms and all of that isn't particularly important in my opinion. I think the concept is enough to replicate the act of refueling a capital ship in deep space and would provide the necessary gameplay loop. Now, I know all of those Starfarer pilots out there saying my ship is in-game and can do the job. But really, I don't think it can or should. It is a great ship that acts as a fuel collector, refiner, and deliverer, and therefore is critical for the economy. And for quantum fuel, maybe it is in-game. But for hydrogen fuel, I think we need something larger for our capital ships. But here's the trick. The whole series would only be able to deliver already refined fuel. We still need the Starfarers out there doing their thing so that oiler captains can deliver bulk fuel to those capital ships. The other option, of course, CIG could give us another ship, another industry ship, but no one would buy that, would they? Now, let's talk about manning and the roles we should expect to see and use on our capital ships. It is a foregone conclusion that almost all player capital ships will have some type of NPC augmentation, and so in a lot of ways I'm talking about how NPCs should be structured so that players can recruit those with the right skills for the right job. Players will also need to divide into the divisional categories I discussed, but their effectiveness will of course be determined by their own skill, whereas an NPC will have the skills that CIG gives them. Now, as anyone might guess, such a complex combat platform has a myriad of tasks that must be accomplished to keep it operational. First, let's discuss ranks on board. I think CIG should stick to something familiar, specifically the officer, warrant officer, enlisted model. Within these three primary categories, you should have on average 5 officer ranks, 5 warrant officer ranks, and 9 enlisted ranks. Strictly for the NPC crew, transitioning to the 4th officer rank, 4th warrant officer rank, or 5th enlisted rank transitions the NPC into a senior officer, senior warrant officer, or non-commissioned officer, respectively. At each of these transitions points, I think that additional skills should be unlocked to further improve the NPC, making them more effective. As a general rule, officers are capable of a broad array of tasks, focusing on leadership, planning, and managing of forces. They do typically have a focus area, but can also operate outside of that focus area at need. Warrant officers are highly skilled, single-track specialty officers. Typically subordinate to all officers, including the lowest O1, warrant officers represent the ultimate authority for knowledge and skill in a specific area. Finally, enlisted personnel provide the backbone of any force, so to that end, most of our crew should be composed of them. We should have a significant selection of personnel at these ranks capable of filling the required divisional roles and responsibilities. Now, having discussed the ranks we should have as a model, let's discuss onboard organization. For this topic, I'm going to generalize because for the US Navy at least, this can get a lot more complex than perhaps what we need in Star Citizen. So what I will lay out are the core divisions that we will need as players to be able to manage either player or NPC crews effectively. For the primary divisions, we are looking at weapons or tactical, engineering, a preservation division, more on that one in a second, operations, logistics, intel, and finally electronics warfare. The weapons division's roles are pretty obvious. Enlisted NPCs, or players role-playing, would be responsible for manning and maintaining all weapon systems on board the ship, while officers in this division would be responsible for administering the division and helping employ those weapon systems in combat. For the administration skill, an interesting mechanic might be that if your NPC does not have a high score in this area, guns are not maintained by the NPCs to the highest standard. They might overheat more often, or turrets might have a more limited traversal range, which would significantly impact the effectiveness of the ship in combat. For gun employment, it might simply be that a well-trained officer gives a general buff to the gun crews, making them more effective, while a poor score would do the opposite. Officers might also have a motivational skill that assists them in the role of getting administration of the ship complete. This might offset an enlisted gunner's unwillingness to clean and maintain his systems. For the enlisted, you would see a similar mechanic with the maintenance skill impacting weapon turret performance and the gunnery skill directly impacting accuracy. There might also be a self-starter or initiative skill as well. This might offset a poor officer's ability to direct or motivate his gunners to complete scheduled maintenance because this gunner keeps his weapon clean and functional by his own accord without being directed to do so. I would offer that as these enlisted individuals gain experience, there might come a point where you promote them to either a non-commissioned officer or NCO or to a warrant officer. The branch chosen, NCO or warrant, would impact skill progression going forward. NCOs could gain motivation as a skill to assist the officer, while warrant officers might gain an advanced gunnery skill that make them far better than average at both maintaining and employing their weapon system. Finally, this division might also house any personnel trained to respond to being boarded or assigned to boarding parties. That is, if you don't have a Marine contingent on board. In this, I am specifically talking about specialized training, but we'll have more on that in a moment. The engineering division's role is also obvious, with crewmen maintaining the ship's thrusters and main engines while ensuring that all systems across the ship function as intended. This would include ship's electrical systems, which might cover everything from malfunctions in lighting or a bridge station, as well as maintaining the wiring harnesses that transfer power to various parts of the ship, like shields and weapons. There probably should be a difference between crew capable of fixing mechanical versus electrical issues, and certainly a massive difference in those capable of operating on different types of engines. If CIG takes my advice, then an engineer trained on a hydrogen-fueled engine would require a significant retraining to operate and maintain a larger fission-fusion science fiction engine on a capital ship. For smaller ships in general, however, you might find an engineer that can handle both mechanical and electrical concerns, but they might be rated for a smaller vessel with less complex systems. This division would also provide the best and most experienced personnel for damage control teams. Ultimately, NPCs with high engineering skills might allow you to shift power more quickly between systems like weapons and shields, and they certainly would be able to repair the ship faster or maintain it to a higher level. Next, we have the Preservation Division, which in modern Navy parlance is manned primarily by the deckhands. I asked my Navy compadre why ship crews were always so obsessed with cleaning every surface on the ship, even pipes, and his response that it wasn't fire like so many would have you believe, but general cleanliness, which directly impacts the health of the crew. So this is where the Preservation Division becomes key. They are busting rust, as the Navy would put it. They are cleaning the decks and those out-of-the-way places. They are effectively ensuring that the ship is in prime condition while also helping to maintain a healthy place for the crew to work. But they may also be responsible for ensuring a secure docking for that capital ship, as this is another role played by deckhands in modern navies. They are manning the ropes on deck to ensure the ship is secure, so their skills could include cleaning, general maintenance, and docking operations. And if those duties are not performed, then maybe the crew will get a debuff for being forced to live in a less clean environment. Next, we move on to the Operations Division. Personnel in this division would be primarily responsible for the day-to-day running of the ship. This division, like all others, might be composed of a mix of the 3 tiers of ranks. NCOs might have skills related to piloting the ship, while officers have skills related to navigation and command of the ship. This is the division where the ship's captain and the XO would be located, as well as any operations officers or plans officers assigned or required for the ship. Augmenting this division are any personnel the ship's captain wants to assign to serve as a bridge watchstander, known as the Officer of the Deck or the Tactical Action Officer. The Officer of the Deck position has primacy of command during normal ship operations when the captain is not on shift. The Tactical Action Officer has primacy of command if the ship suddenly finds itself in a combat situation. In the best of situations, these officers work in tandem to ensure that all ship's functions are conducted effectively no matter what situation the ship finds itself in. Having this operations division will be key to ensuring that when players just don't have time to log on and crew your ship, there are NPCs capable of at least offering some sort of organized defense if you come under attack while attempting to use your ship with minimum players available. This might really come into play if you are somewhere other than the bridge when you come under attack. The NPC Officer of the Deck or Tactical Actions Officer can put the ship at battle stations and begin to fight back until you can come and take command. Next, we have the Logistics Division. Likely the smallest division on board, this division is responsible for organizing and distributing all of those classes of supply that we talked about earlier. I imagine this might only be 1 to 6 personnel on any ship, but it would be these crewmen that ensure the efficient use of all the supplies we will be required to bring along to feed both players and NPC crewmen. They might also have skills that boost our ability to negotiate for a better price for supplies on some faraway world we are patrolling. If you've ever read David Weber and John Ringo's Empire of Man series, then you'll know the character named Portania. He was an armorer first and foremost, but he was also an excellent negotiator and so took over as the logistician for the main character of the book, and he generally ensured that the good guys didn't get taken advantage of when purchasing supplies on their journey. This division might also be where we assign the ship's doctor, the cook, or an armorer for larger ships, though in Age of Sail terminology these roles would be considered idlers, not because they were idle all day, but because they usually did not pull shifts like the rest of the crew. They were awake during the day and in general whenever they were needed. Next on the list is the Electronics Warfare Division. Now, the US Navy divides this division into 3 subdivisions: Electronic Support, Electronic Attack, and Electronic Defense. The support section houses your radar operators most typically. They are the ones calling out new contacts and trying to identify a ship type as soon as possible based on emissions. Those in Electronic Attack are busy trying to jam the opponent's ship, as well as any guided munitions that are inbound. A good Electronic Attack crewman might drastically impact an opponent's ability to accurately target your ship. Meanwhile, the Electronic Defense crewman is desperately trying to clear any interference your ship is experiencing so that you can accurately target those incoming pirates or an opposing organization. Finally, we have the Intelligence Division. Like Logistics and EW, I imagine this is a fairly small division. Players may go about this very differently, but from an NPC perspective, the Intel crewman might speed up your ability to identify opposing ship types as well as identify specific loadouts. This will have real meaning if CIG drastically increases the range of our passive and active scanners on large ships and recon ships, as these NPC crewmen would be able to help us better understand our surroundings and plan accordingly. They might also help identify zones on your opponent's ship that have already seen damage, and so you might be able to exploit that with your gun crews or skilled fighter pilots. Now, let's talk about the skills that all players and NPCs must have for a capital ship to experience success. First, all crewmen, be they player or NPC, must have a firefighting skill because every single crewman on board a ship of this size or these sizes are trained firefighters. This goes for large civilian ships as well. That score may be 0, but it is a score we should be able to see so we can determine if we want to hire an NPC or leave him at the dock. Second, everyone on a modern military vessel is trained to deal with flooding, so for Star Citizen, all crewmen should have a skill rating for responding to hull breaches. Third, all crew are trained on sentry duty or watchstanding. Now, what this is really speaking to is that when a ship is docked, everyone on board knows how to use a weapon and can stand watch to prevent unauthorized access. But for our use in Star Citizen, that also means that the entire crew can serve as the Bravo team in shipboard security, meaning that they at a minimum can shoot back at unauthorized boarders. Now, remember earlier I said we would talk about personnel specifically trained to board an opponent's ship or to repel boarders. The US Navy calls them the Alpha Team. Now, for our purposes in Star Citizen, just like in real life, this is a secondary skill unless they are trained Marines. We might take our best trained individuals on our crew and we assign them to Alpha Team. If we are boarded, the OPSO or XO or Captain might give the command to repel boarders, and these personnel would leave their current posts, arm up, and move to repel. That doesn't mean the rest of the crew won't shoot at boarders, but they aren't specifically trained for it, and so they would be less effective. Also, they won't necessarily abandon their current duties to repel boarders and will only shoot at them if they are approached. This will offer the ship's captain some real choice regarding which personnel he wants to train for his Alpha Team, as they will cease their primary roles and transition to a security team. Now, I think we have sufficiently covered the complex task of manning a capital ship. So let's now move to discussing the missions we should expect to see with regard to capital ships. This presents an interesting challenge to CIG. As a part of the UEE's Militia Mobilization Initiative, these military warships were sold to civilians in what can only be seen as a desperate effort by the UEE to broaden their security footprint in the verse with a less direct UEE military or police intervention. In other words, throwing money at military contractors to solve a security problem. So with that said, and without going into unlawful use of military capital ships, I think we have a great starting point for a variety of missions that can be scoped for capital ships. The first we already have in game, and that is what I would call a forward presence type of mission. The patrol missions over both Hurston and Yela are of course currently scaled for small groups of fighters, but there is certainly room to grow these missions as you progress in reputation to include larger capital class threats. I also think we can place in this category freedom of navigation operations, where forward presence patrols might be placed near a planetary body so that it can be clearly seen by all the player and NPC organizations. A freedom of navigation operation might be along a trade route deep in the empty space of a system between two planets. These might have combat and they might not. It could be boring, or you could suddenly find yourself deep in the crap. Now, I will take a brief moment here to offer criticism on the current mission profiles. I very much dislike the amount of detail that CIG currently places in their pre-mission briefings. I would expect that as they add in scaled up versions of their current patrol missions and bounty missions, a significantly increased amount of information to be provided to the ship's captain. Specifically, target ship type, a rough estimate of escort size, and experience levels. It is fairly irritating to take a mission only to find that your target exceeds your ship's capability by miles. And by this I mean you could run your ship dry munitions before you even punch through the target ship's shields. In reality, no one would take such an uncertain mission routinely. It smacks of absolutely crap intel work by the person doing the hiring. My other criticism is related to payouts, and that is that the payouts for Caterpillar and Hammerhead missions are pathetic. If CIG wants to encourage groups to take on larger targets in smaller ships or with larger multi-crew ships through the shared mission function, then the price needs to reflect the risk and time spent as well as the number of players required for the target. No one wants to waste 30 minutes for a 500 to 1,000 credit payout. A mission designed for multiple players to accomplish should pay out a reasonable amount of credits. Let's say if the base payout is 1,500 to 2,000 credits per player per mission, and I'm not saying that it is, it's just an example, then a ship that requires 3 players to take down should pay out 4,500 credits minimum. So, just think about what the payout should be to take down the Idris they were planning on putting in 3.9. If 50 players in small ships can't do it, then you can imagine the risk involved in even trying. The payout has to be worth the risk. Now, I understand they may be trying to encourage us to test other things by lowering the payouts drastically, but the balance is fairly broken in my opinion. If we are expected to test new mechanics for ships, most of us need to earn money to rent or in-game buy those ships to test. If the payouts for other professions like combat or bounty hunting are reduced to meaningless, how do players with ships that can only do those things earn profit enough to test those new mechanics? It's kind of a vicious cycle. Finally, getting back on track, forward presence or freedom of navigation missions offer an additional mechanic as well. Maybe as a secondary mission that is actually maybe going to pay out better than the primary mission. That is intelligence gathering. Capital ships are very capable collectors in the SIGINT realm, but in Star Citizen they might also be able to capture imagery as well. The mission might be go show the flag, but while you're there, maybe listen in and take some pictures. This can add some much needed depth to mission parameters and add an additional opportunity to earn credits for capital ships. The next mission set I think that CIG can build into the game is conventional deterrence. These missions might be along the Xi'an border given that we are only recently at peace with the Xi'an with an effort to de-escalate tensions. This might be a more political type of mission where players might be expected not to fight but to talk. Specific dialogue choices could determine both reputational gain as well as monetary profit. A failure might not result in combat, but in a drastic loss of reputation with the UEE and the Xi'an alike. The flip side of this is clearly deterrence missions along the existing Vanduul system lines, working to prevent them from getting any ideas that it's safe to try and expand their influence. This type of mission would of course be a high-risk mission, which should have an equally high level of compensation, both monetarily and reputationally. Not to beat a dead horse here, but if the UEE is going to hire civilian private military companies, or PMCs, to conduct combat ops for them, then the price is high. In reality, there is profit no matter what CIG thinks regarding cap ship profitability. PMCs are in the business of making money, and if they are not going to earn, then they won't take the job. Players can't be expected to take risks without appropriate compensation or reward. Now, that payment can come in many ways. Certain reputation levels may allow you free refit and rearm from the UEE for your capital ship. That will certainly cut overhead and maximize profits. There could be a reduced wait time for replacement if you lose your ship on a UEE combat mission. But regardless, given lore and how the UEE has structured the Militia Mobilization Initiative, they should offer steep incentives in addition to pay to entice players to accept the risk. Our next mission types are related to direct combat. In other words, the UEE or some other wealthy organization hiring the players to specifically engage in warfare on their behalf. This type of mission comes in 2 basic flavors. The first is the deliberate strike. This might be a spaceborne target or a planet-side target, and your mission would be to get in, strike the target with precision, and get out. I would also lump into this deliberate strike mission set the capital class bounty missions. As new capital ships are brought online for players to use, I think adding those into the rotation of missions is exactly where we need to go. However, I would stipulate that if CIG does this, there needs to be a capital class tab for missions that clearly delineates for players that they need a ship of substantial capability to accomplish the mission. The second could be something along the lines of a deliberate fleet action. Now this might require the players to defend a larger capital ship while it accomplishes an objective as a part of a larger fleet. At the highest reputational levels, this objective might be so large it requires multiple player capital ships to accomplish, and only the largest organizations or a group of organizations can accomplish it. These types of missions really lend themselves as well to CIG-run world events, be it a massive battle against the Vanduul or against a unique, rare alliance of pirate organizations. As a world event, individuals or small organizations, all the way up to the largest organizations, might contribute to the success of the mission in their own way. Finally, and lastly, we have humanitarian aid or response missions. Now, it is fairly common for the US and other countries to send carriers and other military forces in response to humanitarian crises, such as the typhoon that almost destroyed Tacloban in the Philippines or the more recent earthquake in Nepal. Now, I know there are more recent examples, but I was a planner for these responses, so I used them as my example. Now, you may ask, why does the military need to respond to these things? And I would tell you that it is because very few organizations in the world can respond so quickly with the rotary wing assets needed to rapidly move supplies around. Today, helicopters, and especially heavy lift helicopters, are not a dime a dozen. Militaries house droves of them, and they can be pointed at a problem and told, fix that, support that, and they will do their best to do so. They bring with them all the organic parts, fuel, personnel, and command structure to make all of that work immediately. Civilians typically do not. Now, in Star Citizen, we the players will have much of this capability. Intra and inter-system organizations with membership and organizational structures, as well as assets to rapidly respond to an emerging crisis with ease. Or so we would like to think. We have hospital ships like the Endeavor and massive cargo ships like the Hull E. And we have the security enough to secure the supplies we deliver. Humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, or HADR missions, are some of the most complex in the world and require patience, calm, and long hours. I think these would best be CIG-run world events where, much like a deliberate fleet action, individuals and organizations can take part by running supplies in space or on planet, or securing trade routes, or even providing security to the NPC nonprofit workers on the ground handing out food and supplies. And that is it. What a journey we have taken. Capital ship gameplay has such a potential that it is kind of staggering. I've learned a ton about how navies operate in my research, and I hope that this gives you some new ideas of how you want to employ your capital ships. So now this is the point where I ask you, did I miss something? Do you have a mission I forgot, or a crew position that you find to be critical to your capital ship? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe if you want to see more. And if you're new to Star Citizen or you are looking for an organization, come check out a.m.m.o. Links as always are in the description down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Later.